Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really do appreciate it. Hope you'll come back often. Hope you'll tell your friends about us. Before we start the show, I want to start with our show's prayer by Father Ron Walters. Father Ron?
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and the beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and the artistry you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Well, Walters, thank you so very much for everything that you do for our show, not just the prayer to start the show, but also the modeling that you've shown us that you do. So we really do appreciate your help. If you're not a subscriber to our website, I hope that you'll go to it and subscribe. Our website is newtracksmodeling.com, and you'll get a login link for each one of our shows and be able to keep up with what we think we're going to do next. You'll also be able to donate to our scholarship. We have just about finished with this year's scholarship, and we'll be announcing the winner shortly. And I'm really happy that it's been such a success for us. So many of you contributed money, and so many of you contributed your time to help us get the word out to potential applicants. And I'm pleased to say that we couldn't have done this without the help and support of everybody involved in this effort. And it's all because of you, the viewers that watch the show, the readers that read the articles that we write. Those are the people that deserve all the credit, because without you, we never could have been able to succeed. And we never would have been able to get the 501c3 designation. And we never would be able to have the optimism that we have for the next year, the 2024-25 school year. So thank you so very much. And we'll, like I say, we'll be announcing the winner shortly, and hopefully be able to have that person on one of our future shows. We have it scheduled, but I can't tell you exactly when right now. But we do need you to consider donating. We have the link all set up on our website. And the website page is www.newtracksmodeling.com/scholarship. Also, you'll be able to see all of the build-alongs, all of the manufacturers who are giving discounts on their models to you, the builder, who want to build it along with the person who's going to build the model on our show. So you'll be able to find out who they are, when the models are going to be built, and so forth. I also want to mention, if you'll go to my webpage, my Facebook page, you'll be able to see the article that appeared in the local newspaper today. This is the fourth month now that they've run one of my articles. And I've already submitted the one for the August paper. It's supposed to be published August the 9th. So I'm really pleased about the way that that's going. Somebody asked me the other day, geez, Jim, why don't you show us your models? Why don't you talk about your modeling? Well, in that newspaper article, you'll be able to see one of the models that I scratch built in brass back in the 1980s that won first place in the first contest that I ever entered. And that was the O-Scale National Convention. It's not the National Convention anymore. I think it was back then. But it was the O-Scale Chicago meeting. And it's the reason why that meet has such a strong influence and appeal to me. And I'm so sorry that I don't attend it every year like I used to. But it's really special to me because it's the first contest I ever entered, the first model I ever entered in a contest. And the article talks about how that came about and what happened. So if you're interested in that and want to see the model, it's in this issue of the Chronicle newspaper. I'm also writing an article that's going to appear in the O-Scale Resource upcoming magazine that'll be out the end of this month, the end of July. And it talks about what makes a great kit. I think this is crucial. I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding about what makes a great kit out there. And I think if you'll take the time and trouble to look at that article and consider if you agree with it, or if you've got other ideas, love to share them, please do. But I go into pretty great detail on what I truly believe makes a great kit and what needs to be done in our industry in order to improve our kits and help the manufacturers. Because at the end of the day, the small, medium-sized manufacturers are the heart and soul of our hobby. And if they're not successful, our hobby won't be as successful as it could be. And from the first, that group of people has been one of the main groups that I've tried to appeal to and support in our shows. Plus the modelers who have been gracious enough to share their talents and their expertise with us on the shows. So if you get a chance to read it, I encourage you to do so. It'll also be in the upcoming August issue of S-Scale Resource Magazine. So if you're an S-Scaler and want to look at it there, that's fine. If you're an O-Scaler and want to look at it in the O-Scale issue this July, great. If you're an HO Scaler and want to read it, you'll get all of the same benefits as an O-Scaler and S-Scaler out of it because this transcends scale. The only reason it's in O-Scale and S-Scale, those are the two magazines that I write for. And I didn't put it in the newspaper because it's really a lengthy article and there's a limit because the newspaper is a print publication. There's a limit to how much I can put in at one time. I've already exceeded that in one of the articles and they had to publish it 2 different weeks, one half this week and one half next week in order to get it all in. So I'm awfully conscious about that. The My Bill coming up, and I'll turn this over to Chris Course, is next week. So please, Chris, it's up to you.
You're muted, Chris.
I'll bet that's why we don't hear him.
You were muted, Chris.
Crap.
Oh, I heard you.
There we go. Okay. All right. Let's see. The next My Build is next week, July 19th. I won't be, I'll be on vacation, so I probably won't be in attendance, but if you send me those photos, I'll make sure that they get in the slideshow, and whoever runs the show, whether it's Phil or who next week, they'll present your photos. And please be around to talk about those as well. And then, yeah, the email address for me is railrunner130@hotmail.com. And if it's your first time, please include a photo of yourself for your title card. And that's the wrong way. There we go. All right. In August, we have a challenge. It's the harvest because it's getting to be harvest time. So we want to see what you're working on or what you've done for supporting the harvest, whether it's farm equipment, grain elevators, hopper cars, mills, tractors, agricultural items, barns, chicken coops, livestock, food, billboard cars, whatever you can do to tie it into the harvest. That's the August challenge. So, like I said, next week is a free-for-all. Please email those photos to me as soon as you can, and I'll get the slideshow together. And then also, if you want to email me stuff for August as well, I can take those now as well. So this is our way of trying to encourage try to mix things up a little bit, try to get a little bit, maybe a little bit different crowd, get some people that haven't brought their stuff forth before. So please contribute as best you can. And it doesn't have to be, the best work in the world or the worst work in the world. Maybe somewhere in between, something you're stuck on, something you need help with. So anyway, please send us those photos, and I will give it back to you, Jim.
I hope you include your boat in it, Chris, even though you're not going to be here. That's a beautiful model.
Yeah.
And listen, before you go on vacation, if you can send me the stuff for the article, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, we'll do.
Next, I want to talk about modeling lifestyle. The next one that we have coming up is with Dennis Brennan on the 20th of July. You'll meet Dennis a little bit later this evening. Dennis is a tremendous modeler, manufacturer, professional photographer, author. He's done it all in our hobby, and I think you're really going to enjoy meeting him. So I encourage you to join us on Modeling Lifestyle on July the 20th. Remember, the only way that you can view that show is on YouTube, and our YouTube channel is New Tracks Modeling. If you'll subscribe to that channel, then you'll get advance notice for each one of the Modeling Lifestyle shows and the other events that we may have there that are only available on YouTube, and be able to join us live and use the chat function to ask you questions. Now, with that said, let's start the show tonight. First person I'd like to introduce you to is somebody that's been here before, Mr. Tom Farrell. Tom, as you know, is building a great scene on his model railroad. He built a couple of structures on it, and now he's going to build another one. So, Tom, welcome.
Thank you again, Jim, for having me, and thank you, Phil and Pat, for your support and the other support members. I'm going to share screen here. Hopefully this will work. There we go. Okay, my last two presentations focused on building what I'm calling shantytown. These are scratch-built structures that reside on a river, and they're arted up here, but this was the first one. This was last week's. I'll be showing you how I put on this deck this evening, and then this is a third structure that that I basically have completed, and I'll show you how I made that. These are all scratch-built and not kits, and they're all for my rustic buff and old Gothic ON30 railroad. This is the reboot of the railroad. The last one was 15 years in the making and one afternoon to take it out. So here we go. This is the structure I was working on last week. This is now basically complete. When I place it on the railroad, I'll add people, figures, additional detail on the decking, but I'll show you how I did the decking. It's relatively simple, and some other photographs. This is the underside. Now that's scale 2x10 material, but it's obviously not prototypical length, but you're not seeing the underside of this model. So I just took strip wood approximately a foot long and super glued it in place. And then looking down, see, we're a little out of focus here, but I added 2x6s one at a time till I built up the decking. And again, this is the finished model. These the posts are nothing more than dowel rods that are weathered with first a razor saw for graining, and then they're India ink placed on them, and a few acrylics and some green paint to represent algae and moss and things. I put a little of the green on some of the deck boards as well. That's a pretty effective model. I think I'm most surprised with the roofing, the shingles. I mentioned this last week. I had these shingles in my possession for several years. They're laser cut paper. I never thought of them to use them. They didn't look right, but turns out they're probably some of the better looking shingles I've ever used. Just looking at either end of the building. For interest, I put shutters on one end and I put a patched up broken window on the other, just for a little detail here, just adds visual interest. You can see the effect of weathering here. Again, as I'll explain in the next model, this is a very simple technique that gives you outstanding results. I mean, that looks pretty good to me. That I never saw it quite that close up. But basically, the idea is with a razor saw, you scratch that wood and put a wood grain on it. Then you stain it with alcohol wash, and then add some acrylic paint, scratch it a little bit more, and it takes no time. It just looks great. So this is the left and right again. You can see the decking. There, I used what I call variation in color here. You know, it takes no time to go back and restain some of these. Initially, I stain everything gray. Then I go back with browns and other colors of gray and stain individual boards for variation. On this one, I haven't gone back with my X-Acto knife and rough these boards up, but I intend to do that. I'll put knot holes in here. I'll cut the boards. I'll make it a little more weathered. Another view. That's RS Laser. They have lots of products from N scale to 1/32 scale. Really a nice product. These signs are right off of Google search for 1920, 1930 signs, and then I simply bring them into PowerPoint, print them out on regular paper, cut them out and glue them on with Elmer's glue. Here's the third and final structure for the river-based shanty town bait shops that I'm making. So this one only took me a week. One positive thing about doing a weekly show, it used to take me a month to do these structures. Now it takes me a week. Thank you, Jim. So the technique is the same as the last two. I start with a plywood base. Then I use scale clapboard. I, as usual, have just a loose and general plan for the building. These are, this is a Tichy door here, double door. These are Grant Line windows and a Grant Line door. They're on this blue tape because I don't like to hand paint these anymore. What I do is I just take them out to the garage and I hit it with a rattle can and paint them white. I demonstrated the technique last week on what I do, but basically I like these chalky paints from Krylon. And in this particular model, I sprayed this with a white, not shown here, but I sprayed them all with a white Krylon chalky white. And then I went back with India ink and basically stained them. This is a buildup of the structure. As I pontificate over and over, I overly reinforce my structures with 1/4 inch. This is poplar. This is hardwood that I happened to spy at Lowe's, and it was inexpensive, so I just bought a bag of 1/4 inch by 1 foot long poplar, and I just frame the inside of the building with it. Makes it very strong, very stiff. I typically paint, as everyone knows now, or should know that's been watching the show, I paint everything with flat acrylic black. These are these craft store paints. They're the flattest black that I've ever found. I paint everything flat black because I don't detail the inside of my structures. So when you look in there, you don't see anything. So this is the technique that I use for just about all my models. I principally only use these inexpensive craft paints now. They're, for the most part, non-toxic, and they don't give off any fumes, any outgassing. They don't stink like the old Floquills. I paint normally I call this, we'll call this obnoxious yellow. I use a base coat. In this case, I wanted it to be a little off yellow. So I painted the entire piece here yellow, then I let it dry overnight. And the next day I painted it with a white cover coat, I'll call it. And then I mentioned before about scratching the surface. This is that scratch pen that I bought. You can get these at Micro Mark. They're currently out of stock, or Amazon, as I learned. And they have replaceable, they come in either brass or steel tips. This is like a wire, multiple wires here. And I just scratched the white cover coat off the model, enough here to show some of the yellow coming through. And when you scratch it down to the wood and you add your gray, or it's black India ink and alcohol, but it comes out gray. When you add your gray alcohol wash, it penetrates into the wood that you've opened up with this scratch pen. You get a nice weathered effect, as you saw earlier on that previous model. And then if you want to add more color, you can go back and dry brush the base color on there. And it's just a nice effect. It's a simple technique. I mean, that you want to do a world-class finish, that's all there is to it. This is demonstrating the roof. This is a piece of 1/8 inch basswood with the 1/4 inch reinforcement here. I actually wanted to use plywood, but I seem to have run out of thin plywood. So I use this basswood, but maybe I'm anal about this, but I just want these structures to last forever, I suppose. So I put double 1/4 inch material across that. Then I painted it black, but not around the perimeter because that's where the glue goes. Then I just put some glue in here, super glue, and set it in place. Next up, I took Elmer's glue and I just squeezed some Elmer's glue onto the roof. And then with a paintbrush, I spread it around. Then I took some fine cinder ballast and I sprinkled it on the top of the roof. Once that was dry, I went back and I weathered that with various grays and just washes of acrylic paint, just so it wasn't stark black cinders. Here you can see some of the details. See the scratching from the that scratching pen? Anyway, I've seen this many times on models where you see on the side of a bait shop fish. So I sketched with my Micro Mark square and just eyeballed. I made an F. I just worked left to right. The most difficult letter to sketch out was the S. Once I figured that out, I just hand painted it. And here's those windows. You can see how they were originally chalk white. And then with the black alcohol wash, I toned them down into a gray. You see, if you look in there, you really can't see anything because it's black. I went back and I trimmed the very top board perimeter around the roof and the baseboard I painted white. You can see the beginnings of the decking here. We'll get to that later. And here's the model coming along. I found this sign, bait shop, and on Amazon, and it's for a real, call it decorative life or decorative sign that you can hang in your home. The neat thing is you can custom put in names, and then when you go to proof it, I just copied the drawing and I had my own custom sign. So you can put whatever name you want in here, and this is my brother and his wife's name. So Pat and Phyllis Bait Shop, but it's kind of neat to I was playing around with, they have a bunch of signs, you can put custom lettering in there. And now here's a perfect example. This decking is coloring called grayish, whatever that is. But that's, again, that's my base color. So I'm gluing these boards on one at a time, trying to make random joints. And now I have this uniform deck on there. One of the nice things about scratch building is how the building literally comes alive before your eyes. I've always wanted to do, I'll show you, a canvas roof on the side of a building. So I built this structure out of, these are 2x8s, scale 2x8s, and these are 2x4s, and these are vertical 4x4s, and they're just painted white. I started, you won't actually see this up here, but I went back over this with a black alcohol wash. There's my canvas roof. What that is a paper towel. I put Elmer's glue on these rafters, just ran Elmer's glue down the rafters and along the length here. And then I cut the size. I just draped a unfinished, uncolored paper towel on there, a heavy duty paper towel. Then I let it dry. And then I went back and I painted it with acrylic paint. And all of my structures, when I'm completely done, everything gets sprayed with dull coat. So that'll seal it up. It's somewhat fragile, but it looks like canvas. It costs nothing. Here, more or less, is the finished structure. You can see how that off yellow, remember how obnoxious that yellow was? It's very subtle here. And I will have additional weathering on these. I haven't finished the decking here. Some of these boards aren't finished, but I started some of the weathering process. All three structures that I featured in this series have different size decking, different colored decking, and all the buildings are different and different roofs. So there's no commonality amongst them. Even these piers are different sizes. Those aren't finished yet either. Now that I have all three structures complete, scratch-built structures, and there's a fourth you haven't seen that's a carryover from the old layout, I want to show you where I envision putting them and how I've made a change in the design. So this is the Salt Creek River on the rustic buff and old Gothic railroad in front of my covered bridge. That looks like a traffic jam to me, even though these buildings would be set back into the hillside a little bit. It's just not working. The river's not quite wide enough, and we're obstructing the view of the key structure of my old rustic buff and old Gothic. This was the signature structure, and I was blocking the view here with this scheme. So it was actually my wife that suggested that I not do this, and that I allow for a free view of the scratch-built covered bridge that I spent months on making. This is all temporary here. These are temporary colors. This is simply sculptamold in there. Just eventually we'll get cast plastic. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change the course of my river, and I'm going to carve this foam out here. So the next week, I will show you how next week, it's my intention to redirect this river, place these structures into the hillside, and build a dam behind this covered bridge, a concrete dam. So what's going on here? Still see all this? Yep.
Yep.
So there's the 3 scratch-built structures. There's the 4th you haven't seen. That's a carryover from the old layout. The other advantage to having them up front and personal, because the right below the photograph here is the fascia. There's a lot of detail, particularly on all of them. Be ashamed to hide them up the river. So stay tuned for next week's redirection of the river. So any questions from anybody?
You
I have
must
one, Tom.
Yeah.
It's Pat here. Those windows on the side of that building.
The
one you
middle
just
building.
showed us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were they double hung windows set on our side?
This is the first time I ever used windows. They're supposed to be on the side like this. They're double hung on the side. They're a grant line window, but they're meant to be. See the.
Yeah, I thought so.
I never actually liked those type of windows, but I thought I'd try it on this structure.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they're designed to go that way.
Okay.
Thomas, Larry McDonald here. I love these little structures, so much character. But my question, the drawing that you have, that you showed at first, is that your handiwork at art?
These, you mean?
Yes.
No, they're the truth is I am an artist. I can paint, I can draw, but these are just computer images drawn into an art program.
I thought so. I like it. It's quite neat. But when I saw the signs too added to it, I thought, thank you.
I do have the ability, but no, I'm afraid they're just computer generated. Yep.
It looks good. Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Thomas, Charlie Tusek here. Just want to say, great buildings. I think each one of those is worthy of its own scene. And I think your wife was right, trying to separate them. I think it was a little busy, but each building is beautiful. Good job.
Thank you. They are neat little buildings. In particular, I like this one on the end here. But no, and there's going to be a series of buildings right behind them. Going with the theme of Shantytown, there'll be at least 3 or 4 behind these 3. But we'll see how much room there is after I put in the river.
Tom, let me ask you this. The model that you just built,
Yeah.
how much cash money do you think you have in that?
Maybe at the most, under $20.
So guys, I'll tell you one thing, we keep hearing about the high cost of model railroading. It really doesn't have to be. I mean, you can do some beautiful work without having to spend a tremendous amount of money. You may have to learn some skills you don't know right now. You may have to spend a little time making a lot of mistakes. But you can sure do some beautiful work and not spend a tremendous amount of money. So Tom, thank you so very much.
Thank you guys for having me, and I look forward to next week. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Let me ask a question of everybody here. I ran across something the other day that I had never heard of before. And I'm writing an article about it. Has anybody tried to create a simulation of glass windows by painting basswood?
I have one, Jim.
How did you do it? How did you do it, if you don't mind me asking?
Uh,
Because I've never heard of anybody even trying to do something like that.
The model's behind me. Just one second.
All right.
Well, of course, it's only.
Maybe next week you can show it to us, because I thought it was a tremendous technique. I had just never heard anybody talk about how they did it, and it just caught my attention. It's the reason I brought it up. So maybe next week.
Yeah,
Maybe next week.
We lost him. Where did he go?
Looking for that structure.
I have somebody asked him a question on YouTube.
There, those are painted windows. They're not glass.
I'll be darned. I'll be darned. Thank you.
Tom,
Yeah.
had a gentleman ask on YouTube whether you would be interested in making those kits and selling them or putting them up for sale. They want to buy a bunch of them.
Well, then it wouldn't be a hobby anymore, would it?
No, that takes all the time.
You know, I have a friend, George Sherrill. Do you guys know him?
Yeah.
He makes kits. I asked him, might be able to get him to make the kits, these scratch built ones. I'll talk to him. If there's one in particular, just put it in the chat, or
Maybe the person that asked could put his email in the chat, and you could maybe contact him off the screen if you want.
yeah, I could. I'll find his email. We're friends, so I don't want to get into.
Yeah, I know.
Some of you know my background. The least I don't want to work anymore. Working's overrated.
Tom, thanks so very much.
Yeah.
Well, next I want to introduce Dennis Brennan. You've heard me talk about Dennis a little bit. Now you have an opportunity to meet him. Tonight he's going to talk about photography of our models. He's a professional photographer. And like I say, he's one of the two that CalMac calls when they need a layout photograph. So Dennis, thanks so much for being here tonight. Really looking forward to this.
Well, thank you, Jim. Good evening, everybody. As Jim said, I'm a commercial photographer, and I've been doing this for over 50 years and shooting layouts and covers for classic toy trains for the last 30. I've also shot layouts or not layouts, but I've also provided photos for O-gauge railroading and model railroader. And I'm an old film guy. And I thought doing a presentation on model railroad photography should be a snap. And if I was only talking about doing 35 millimeter, then that would be the case. However, I know what some of you must be thinking. Wait a minute, Dennis, wait a minute. When we were doing 35, we had to wait until we got our pictures back before we knew what we had. With digital photography, we can see exactly what we have right now. Well, but with the immediacy of digital photography, I'm trying to get this screen up here. Hold on. Okay. Is everybody seeing that?
Yes.
All
Okay.
good.
All right. So with the immediacy of digital photography, it's often what you don't see that may get you in trouble. However, before we get into that, here are 6 fundamental rules that you need to look at. Number 1, don't use a flash. On-camera flash creates a glare. The foreground often becomes washed out or overexposed, while the background may be too dark or underexposed. Number 2, don't increase the ISO. That is the camera's sensitivity light. Doing that only introduces unnecessary noise or grain into your photo. Number 3, do use the smallest aperture or opening. The largest f number, like f22. I know that seems counterintuitive, but the larger the number, the smaller the aperture or opening that lets the light in. See number 3, do use manual settings for aperture, exposure time, and focus. Manual settings will provide the maximum control for aperture, exposure time, and focus. And number 4, do use the smallest lens aperture, just like I said. And because stopping down or closing your lens to its smallest aperture provides the maximum depth of field. Manual settings for exposure time will help you to understand how changing your exposure affects the photo and will often differ from your camera's auto setting. And 5, a shutter speed from 2 to 8 seconds is not uncommon. So using a tripod is critical. And finally, using a self-timer or a remote trigger eliminates camera shake from manually pressing the shutter. Okay, so now we're going to talk about color temperature and lighting. Color temperature, many of you are probably aware that traditional incandescent household light bulbs that we all grew up with are very warm in comparison to daylight. And that's because these 2 light sources have very different color temperatures expressed in degrees Kelvin. Without getting overly technical, let's just say the higher the color temperature, the bluer or cooler the light. Direct sun plus skylight has a color temperature of about 55 to 6,500 degrees Kelvin. Very blue in contrast to regular light bulbs, which are in the range of 27 to 3000 K. The old standard tube type fluorescent lights and the more recent screw-in compact fluorescent lights, CFLs, come in several different color temperatures. Warm white, cool white, and daylight are the most common. Unlike incandescent lights, fluorescent lights have a discontinuous color spectrum, which means they're deficient in certain colors. That's why things sometimes look more blue or green under fluorescent lighting. Today, LEDs, which use a similar color temperature range, are rapidly replacing these sources. And like fluorescents, however, do not present a perfect color spectrum. Okay. Now, back in the day, film was rated for either daylight or professional 3200K tungsten lights. So the correct color balance was achieved by matching the film to the light source or by placing color compensating filters on camera or in front of the lights. Getting accurate color under fluorescent lights was difficult at best. Enter the digital camera with auto white balance. It seems easy, but if you're not careful, you'll shoot yourself in the foot. Your camera's auto white balance can only do so much. And what it can't do is provide accurate color under diverse color temperatures. For example, some modelers prefer to mix cool white fluorescent tubes with incandescent track lights for layout lighting. The thought being that the warm bulbs offset the starkness of the cool fluorescent tubes and produce a more natural look. But your camera will not see it that way, as evidenced in this photo that's up right now. The test photo is an extreme example where I lit the foreground and background with different color temperature fluorescent bulbs, and the difference, as you can see, is striking. Setting the white balance to the correct 2700K foreground light renders the 4100K background light very blue. Now, if we set the background light, let's see here. If we set the background white to 4100K, look what happens to the foreground. The foreground gets very warm in comparison. But the background is still a little bit too blue because of the discontinuous color spectrum, but that can be corrected, but not for the purpose of this test here. So even setting the color balance to 3400, which is halfway between the two of them, really doesn't help either part of the photo. So the takeaway here, guys, is that you can't use different color temperature lighting when you're doing layout photography. You'll never get accurate color. Now, again, I'm speaking to you as a professional. As a professional, if you're looking to get your photos into a magazine, you need to have good color. Now, what might look good to your eye and might be okay on Facebook or your website is not going to work for a magazine. Trust me on this. So for the purposes of this comparison, I shot one photo in camera raw and then set the white balance to the stated color temperature of the particular light source. Even so, the colors were not entirely accurate, especially for the background light, which, as I said, is still slightly blue. Okay, so now we will move on. Okay, for the most part, when I shoot layouts, I will turn off the overheads and use professional studio lights. In cases where I have to work with an available fluorescent lights, I'll augment the lighting with an inexpensive clamp-on reflector using a 200-watt equivalent compact fluorescent bulb like you see in this photo. Now, in this picture, this is the setup that I used with that. I had overhead fluorescent lights and I used the fluorescent bulb in the simple clamp-on reflector. This is something that anybody can do. The key, though, is I matched the light color temperatures. The overhead fluorescents were 4100K. This reflector and bulb is 4100K. And that gives relatively flat overhead lighting, a little direction or punch. Think of an overcast day with indistinct shadows. As you can see here, this is the shot that I took with that setup. Perfectly acceptable color. And it's kind of a nice overcast looking photo.
Dennis, to measure the light and so forth, you have a meter that you use for that? How do you measure?
Well, yes, I do. As an old film guy, Jim, I have a handheld light meter that I use. But here's the thing, with digital photography, the camera's auto exposure gets you pretty close. What I use my meter for is I will meter the overall scene or the actual shot. I'll meter it. I'll see how my camera agrees with that. But really, the big purpose of the meter as I use it now is this is a relatively tight shot. The background is right behind the camera, behind the engine, and the foreground is right in front. It's very narrow. The depth of field on this is extremely narrow. However, if I were to shoot across a layout and had a lot of stuff in the background, I'd want to make sure that the background lighting was about the same relative exposure as the foreground or what I'm shooting, my subject. And so that's what I use the meter for. I will go around and just handhold the meter and move along the layout to see what the layout lighting is in that particular shot. Now,
for somebody that uses a point and shoot, what you're saying, as I understand it, Dennis, is that the background, the foreground, and the middle of your shot have to have the same light source.
yes, they have to have the same, it should be the same color temperature and the same type of lighting.
Got it.
So oftentimes I will light my foreground, but then I additionally have to light the background.
Got
Okay.
it.
So in this case, with this little tank engine, the overall, or let's call it the ambient light, let's call it skylight, that was the fluorescent tubes overhead. And I matched that color temperature of 4100 degree Kelvin. They were shop lights, fluorescent shop lights at 4100 degrees. I matched it with a bulb.
Right.
So that's where that is.
Thank you.
All right. So let me see, where do we go next? Okay. Now, with that said, we're going to talk about color rendering. And here we have we have several different shots. Now, these were 3 different shots. Each one was taken with the particular light that you see right above the shot. So in the first left-hand shot, I used my professional panel light. These are professional photographic panel lights. They're not cheap. And as you can see, it's 1,000 watt equivalent, and it's 3,200 degrees Kelvin with a 95 color rendering index. Now, what is that? Color rendering index is how accurately a light source will render colors on a scale from 1 to 100. 80 is, 80 to 90 is good. 90 and above is excellent. Well, for all intents and purposes, that's not something that you really need to worry about. Color rendering index only becomes critical when you're doing something for, let's say, an advertising shot and it's clothing, and the advertiser wants to make sure that that clothing color is exactly the color that is on the clothing. Now, for model railroads, it's irrelevant, really. The middle shot was with a 200 watt CFL bulb, like you saw before, at 4100 K, and that has an 82 CRI. And as you can see, the colors are pretty close to one another. The third one is an LED utility light, 150 watt equivalent, and that's rated at 4000 K with 70 CRI. And yet, when you look at all 3 of these pictures, they look pretty dang close. Now, what I did do though, is I shot these in RAW, and I then went into Photoshop and I used the auto white balance in Photoshop to see how close it would come to these temperatures. Because when you use auto white balance, you're actually setting the color temperature. So in auto balance, this panel light registered exactly 3,200 degrees Kelvin, but there is a little slider which will change the color from sort of green through red a little bit. It will balance the color a little bit. That one didn't end up in the middle at 0. It came over a little bit, again, because even professional panel lights like that one still don't have a perfect color spectrum. The next one, that one was listed at 4,100K, but when I did an auto white balance, it came out at 3,950, and it was over much more in the scale, red green scale. And the final one, that one came out at about, I think it was 3,900K, and it had the most deviation in the red to green scale correction. But when I corrected all three of them, you can see that they're pretty ding dang close, and that would be more than enough for magazine reproduction, and it's more than enough for anything that I do professionally, unless I had to be extremely critical. At any rate, when I do professional work, for the most part, I'm using professional studio lighting. And it's not just panel LED lights. I also have the typical studio tungsten lights, Fresnel lens, heavy duty lighting instruments that will throw a beam. So that will take care of that. Now, you're going to run into the different types of files that you're going to get when you shoot digitally. And this is where I'm probably going to end this. We'll talk about this briefly. And next week, I will be talking about everything we haven't covered here, which is going to get more into the aesthetics and the camera for photography. So let's just go through RAW. First of all, think of RAW as a digital negative. It's uncompressed and unprocessed image data captured by your digital camera, and shooting in RAW will capture a high level of detail with large sizes of files and a lossless quality. The direct image data means you start with a high quality image that can be edited, converted, and compressed in a non-destructive manner. Like I said, think of it as a digital negative. When you set your camera up, when you're shooting in RAW, you can set it on auto white balance. You could set it on the wrong white balance. It really doesn't matter, because all the settings on your camera are doing, like the color settings, the white balance settings are doing, is telling your camera or whatever monitor you're using how to look at it. And so it's really not something that's baked into the actual file. Now, TIFF files are a handy way to store high quality images before editing if you want to avoid a lossy file formats. TIFFs are a lossless form of file compression, which means they're larger than most, but they don't lose image quality. So when I get done in Camera Raw, I do the basic editing in Camera Raw, like brightness and contrast and tweaking the white and the black values. Then I will go into Photoshop, and I will, I will do some cropping, or, maybe cleaning up any little spots or changing some things. And then I will save that image as a TIFF file. And when I submitted a file to the magazine, they want either RAW or TIFFs. I do not send out RAW files because I don't want anybody messing with my original. The TIFF file is exactly how I saw the picture to begin with. And if you give somebody a RAW file, they can change it drastically. So I don't do that. And nobody ever bugs me about it. And if they did, I just wouldn't I just wouldn't do it. So now JPEGs, most of your cameras, even your point and shoots and your phones, maybe iPhone is a little different, but a lot of your cameras will automatically output in a JPEG, even if they have RAW, even if they, so point and shoots especially will output a JPEG, but most of them offer TIFF files or RAW files as well. And the same thing with a digital single lens reflex. They will usually want to output in JPEG unless you tell it, unless you change it. So at any rate, that's where I'm going to end this today. So if anybody has any questions, please speak up or forever hold your peace.
Anybody have any questions for Dennis?
Yeah, Dennis, this is Tom Farrell. I assume a JPEG and a PNG file are the same. You have image loss quality, is that right?
No, actually PNG, I believe, is a Photoshop file, is it not? PNG is actually, if I'm correct, now I'll have to, because I don't use them, but I believe it's another file that is lossless, not a lossy file.
That's good to know.
Dennis, this is Ron Walters. Does the lens make a difference when you're taking a photograph?
In what respect?
Do you use a wide angle? Do you use a standard? Do you use a telephoto? Or do you use all of them?
Yes. Yes. And that is something that I can talk about this now. I will show you next time. If anybody is interested in me talking about it now, I can, but I don't really have a photo to show you some really striking differences. And I want to point out, I'll point it out right now because it's one of my pet peeves. You've asked that question because a lot of people, and I'm not saying you particularly, but a lot of people have the impression that a wide angle lens is will give you greater depth of field than a telephoto lens. Now, your depth of field depends on three things. One is the lens, the millimeter of your lens. The other is how close you are to your subject. And the third one is the aperture. Okay, so if everything else is equal, in other words, if you put your camera in the exact same position with a wide angle lens and a telephoto lens and take the shot, you're going to have greater depth of field with a wide angle lens. However, if you move your camera all the way back and zoom in and fill the frame with the subject from, let's say you start at A and then you go over to, let's say, C, right? If you have A to C in focus or in the shot from one edge of the shot to the other in a wide angle shot, and then you go back and you do the exact same thing with your telephoto lens, guess what? The depth of field is exactly the same. The photo won't look the same, but the depth of field will be the same. Whether you want to use a telephoto lens shot or a wide angle shot depends on what you're trying to do with the photograph. And like I said, I use every bit of the lens.
The reason I asked the question, Dennis, is that a lot of cameras come with a standard 55 or 50 millimeter lens. And guys don't know that maybe a better shot could be taken depending upon where you place your camera with a different lens. And a lot of camera companies will try to sell you, obviously, because they're going to make money, the telephoto or the wide angle to help you. when I was taking pictures as a high school photographer, as a teacher, I needed all three for various reasons. And my students, of course, were all trying to take the pictures with their standard lenses that came with the cameras. So my pictures always turned out better than theirs because I knew which lens to use for which situation. But that's the reason I was asking the question. Often in a layout, you may not have the room to use certain lenses, and you have to stick with the room you have and the distance you are from what you're trying to photograph.
Exactly. The problem today that I see over and over, almost every digital camera you buy today, not a single lens 35 millimeter. I'm talking about a digital camera, comes with a zoom lens. Okay. Now, back in the film day, we used 3 different lenses and we learned how to shoot with 3 lenses. They're all different and they all have, and since you're an old film guy too, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The problem today is, and maybe you've seen this, I see people will put their camera on a tripod, set the tripod where it's comfortable for them at their eye level, wherever they feel, plop it down, and then zoom in to frame the shot. They don't even think about what lens they're using. And that is a problem because you need to think about, I see it, and I'm sure you do, you see your photos, oh, that's a wide angle shot. Oh no, that's a medium shot. Or, hey, that would look great as a telephoto. All right. So that's where I'm coming from. Here's another thing that I use a telephoto shot for, especially when I'm doing layouts. Most of the time, not most of the time, a lot of times the background is terrible. Somebody has a great layout and they have a concrete wall in the background, right? Well, obviously, I'm not going to shoot the background. If I have to, then I end up having to do some Photoshop work, but I try to avoid that. So what do? I use a telephoto. If you, by compressing the depth of field, you're also compressing the angle of view, and you can eliminate stuff that you don't want to see. And it looks perfectly natural. But again, you have to know what each of those lenses will do. And unfortunately today, people don't do that. Any other questions?
Well, Dennis, thank you so very much for this evening, and looking forward. Dennis will be back next week to continue this discussion. So Dennis, thank you so very much. I learned an awful lot tonight from you, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you. And if anybody has any other questions that you would like me to address next week, just tell Jim.
Please don't tell me. Just send an email to Dennis directly. And
yes, you can do that.
And Dennis can put his email address in the chat function, and he always responds to me. I'm sure he'll respond immediately to you. So if you have some questions or things that you'd particularly like for him to cover next week, send him an email. So okay. Dennis, thanks so very much.
Hey, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I hope everybody had a good time. Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, now I want to introduce you to Martin Brechbiel, NMR. You heard Martin talk about the K-brake systems, underbody detail last week. And tonight he's going to talk about another kind of underbody brake system. And I think between these two, you can pretty well do anything that you want to as far as cars are concerned for your model railroad. So Martin, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I guess that's always true, that you can always do whatever it is you want to do to your cars anyhow. Nobody's going to stop you, least of all me. Let's see if we can get sharing up. And there's a set of slides. Shocking. Looks like they're actually working. So the basic AB brake system. Okay, this is not going to be quite as extensive as last week, simply because I don't really install very many of these. When you model pre-1920, you don't see too many AV brake systems in your models. In fact, none, effectively. So, you know, not none, but it's a very low percentage. So I'm going to, it's basically look at what everybody else has done and find something close and try to emulate it. But I forgot about this last week. There's actually on the NMRA, there's a PDF file of far more information than you will ever want to know about brake systems in your entire life. I got about to page 3 and promptly fell asleep. It's dry reading, but lots of pictures for those who can avoid the text. But it's informative. And again, more than you really need to know, unless you really want to know it. Okay. The basic AB brake system. There's a diagram. I've forgotten what year this was. It's the Model Railroader, not Model Railroader magazine, the Model Railroader. So we're in the 40s or something. But, you know, it hasn't changed that much. And it's pretty much generic to some extent. You've got your basic parts. You've got a brake cylinder, a triple valve, and an air reservoir, an air tank. And the rest of the brake system is pretty much the same as a K-brake. You got a couple of levers, you got some rods connecting it to the brake units in the trucks. I may or may not have this type of brake wheel system and a fulcrum and a handbrake quadrant, but you know, it's basically those parts. You're just updating the K-brake cylinder to the 3 parts. Okay, so this is right out of the precision scale catalog. So you can, you know, those are all part numbers if you really want to scribble them down or just steal it off the slides. But all this stuff's readily available. And guess what? Right in the catalog, there's a diagram. Wow, nothing like a diagram to get you what you really need to know. Where do these go and how do I connect them together? Well, this is just one example of how you connect things together. This is the box cars and refrigerator, reefer cars. Basically a box, house car. Different cars have different arrangements. However, you get into hopper cars, well, you don't have all that space. So you've got to bend things around and it's all stuck at the far one end. It's a little tight. So you want to do all this stuff. It's a little tricky building this into your car, your models, if it's not already there for you. But, this is actually rotated a few 90-degree angles, but same with the fulcrum actuator, a lever. Pretty much, same idea. It's just crammed into the one side of the car. Okay, so where do these parts go? Well, God, that depends on what the model is. It depends what the prototype is. They can be anywhere on these cars. In the middle, these are all gondolas. I think there are 4 different types of gondolas. It's pretty, it's a precision scale brass car. This, I think, was a Pacific Limited car. I'm not sure if I remember exactly. But you can see they're, cram them all over one side or spread them out across or kind of spread them over this way, spread them that way, turn the air brake reservoir that way. There's lots of possibilities. So, choose one if you have the option. But if you know what the prototype is for, where they did it on your car that you want to build a model of, follow how they did it. It gets a little funky though, when you're some of these center sills. These are solid center sills. This is an open one, and it's riding above it. Some of them you have to cut the holes in the center sill for the levers to actuate through. It makes it a little more fun. I'm working on a resin car right now, and the levers go through the center sill. So, get out the drill and the knives and start carving holes. So, again, variations on location. Valves over here, reservoirs here, triple valves over here, but okay, they're over here now, but there's the brake cylinder way over here. Okay, and it's above this bracing, which seems really odd to me, to be honest. I would think it would actually be below that, but who knows? And this was actually out of a recent Craftsman. I don't even know what kind of car it is, but again, another variation on the theme. Triple valve on a bracket, air reservoir mounted here. There's your cylinder over here. Okay, so the levers go through here, connect through here. All this stuff gets connected up, and there's the plumbing. I'll call things plumbing for lack of a better word, since I have a congenital hatred of all things related to plumbing and having to do it. It's the fastest way I know how to empty my house is to ask me to do plumbing. The language will scare anybody. Okay, where do you get parts from? Well, okay, obviously, I've showed you the precision scale catalog, so you know those parts are available. Precision, at least to no scale, they come in brass or plastic. Take your choice. You don't have to build in brass. You don't have to do this. These are white metal. This is the old Glorycraft kit pieces. I don't know who made these. These are Walthers or somebody. The infamous somebody. All Nation, they had a black plastic set. I'm not quite sure what that plastic is. I don't believe it's styrene, but it's something funky. Wiseman Model Services. They sell an entire AB system. $10, it's white metal. I think it's $20 if it's brass. Nice. It comes with a diagram. It comes with more than a diagram, actually. Okay, so here's our victim for how to install this. A Railcraft gondola. I did one of these, a year or so ago. That one had brass sides. This one actually has, this one's all tin-plated steel. Makes it fun to solder. So we're not going to solder any of this stuff. We're just going to glue it all in place as best as possible. And I'm not going to run a train line because the problem is I'd have to drill a hole through every one of these, go through here, around the corner, out the back, and drilling through these after the car has been assembled. Well, I don't have the tool for that. It's just not going to happen. So we're just going to ignore the train line and pretend it's there. And there's our objective. This is the car I did about a year ago. Put all that stuff in there. So it seems reasonably easy. So here's the nice thing about the Wiseman set. It gives you everything, where everything goes. There's your standard car, looking at the underside as if car were, So here's your hopper over here. Yeah, so you can do this. Scale City Designs also sells an entire hopper AB system as a single casting. It's all three pieces, and some of the plumbing's even together with that, and it's all white metal. So here's how this is why I kind of like this. It gives you everything. But we're only going to use those three parts: some brake levers, old white metal ones. Same story as last week. Turnbuckles, some brass wire, some 15 by 60 thousandths flat brass. Same. We just keep moving forward. Okay. Well, you need a place for these things to sit. Now, you turn over most cars and you see someone just glued the three pieces in, and they just randomly glued it. They drew a hole and stuck it in there with some glue and walked away. Okay, so that doesn't make any sense because it can't work. Brake cylinder has to sit above this stuff so it can run the levers and connect all the other plumbing. So this is 1/4-inch channel, and that spacing is important because the ends of the cylinder, let's back up. You can't see it. Okay, the ends of the cylinder here are actually lower than the cylinder on the brake cylinder. So the ends of the cylinder have to be on the outside of the channel that I glued in place. So you got to test fit it, get it right, glue it in place. Don't touch it until the glue is rock hard. And cylinder is mounted. This one came with the clevis casting in it. I'm going to keep that because it's a little chunky, but the opening's big enough that I can put the levers into it. It's a bit of a compromise. Could have chopped it off, drilled it out, put a brass wire in, put a clevis in that you make. but this height puts the lever just above the center sill. So there'll be a lever here. It's foreshadowing. Okay. Don't forget to drill things. I forgot to drill this back part. And with a little creative drilling with a hand drill and a Dremel, I got something close to a hole. I'll describe it politely as something close to a hole for a piece of plumbing to come out the back of the cylinder. Here are the holes. There are actually these two. They're well marked on the Wiseman castings, so they're easy to drill. There are 4 holes you need to drill on the triple valve. A little sloppy on this one, but we'll have to make do with it. I tend to drill these at least 5 thousandths larger than the brass wire I'm using, because fitting it all together later, I don't want to be fiddling about trying to get things to fit into little tiny holes that I can't see, or I'm working almost by feel. And I want it to snap right into place. Drop a glue in there and walk away right away before I disturb it. Once I get it right, I'm not looking back. Okay, so we'll mount the other 2 pieces. We've got the triple valve mounted. The holes face the air reservoir. Air reservoir is mounted. Those 2 holes face the triple valve. That's where they go. And I just chose this location. These 2 could have been over here. This could have been over here. I just kind of cluster them tight together. So we can optimize the amount of pain in getting all the brass wires all together in one place. Okay. Brake levers and connecting rods and clevises, it's the same as last week. There's nothing really changing here. Same lever coming off the cylinder. That one goes to the brake wheel. This one goes to the truck. This one connects here, and that one goes to the other truck. And we've got 3 brake hangers. They're from the 15 by 60 thousandths brass. 90-degree twist on each end of it. They're ready to go into place. Bingo, they're in place. Snap them in. Okay, that's all the easy, fun stuff. Now we got to connect all the brake components together. Okay. There's a lot on this slide, obviously. It's so busy that this is what we call a really, really bad slide because it has too much stuff on it. I would have gotten chastised terribly for doing this 20 years ago. Anywho, there's your holes. I put a little color coding on it. The bottom 2 of the triple valve go to the air cylinder. That one goes to the brake cylinder. The little green one actually connects down to the train line. Okay, lots of fun here. You've got to insert in a hole, bend out, bend up, over, down, at an angle, straighten it out, and stick it in the hole. Okay. It's not too terribly difficult to do, but it's a lot of bend, test fit, bend, test fit, bend, test fit, bend, test fit, fiddle with it, snip, throw it away and start over. Do it again. Oh, that's a lot closer. I'll keep that one. And then you get to do it a second time. And theoretically, since you had practice with the first one, the second one's a lot easier. And I can testify, the second one is easier. Mainly because I think you can actually see the hole better. This one's a really hard one because it's underneath this and you can't really see what you're doing. So you're kind of fiddling about with a pair of hemostats, looking for the hole. And once it pops in the hole, you're like, give me this CA quick so I can put a drop of glue on it so it doesn't come back out of the hole. A hard one actually is connecting up to the brake cylinder because it actually has to come out, go down and around this projection off the triple valve. It comes over here, drops in the back, done. This comes out and goes down to the train line that's not here. Remember, you're imagining it's there. There's a little bit of goo on the other end of this wire, just holding it down there so it won't wander off. And that's all there is to it. This is it. It's not that hard. And don't think I have another slide. Hey, guess what? I'm right. Because this car is in the paint shop right now, and that's been an interesting experience right now because of the ridiculous humidity we're having in this area. But yeah, the DC humidity is it's like wearing the weather. So that'll be done soon.
Anybody have any questions for Martin?
I do. Martin, on your drawings and in prototypical operation, the two rods that are going to the trucks, do they typically pull or push?
I think they actually push.
That, looking at your diagrams, I wasn't sure if the brakes were on or off, but if they were off, it looks like they push.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they're off so the car rolls.
Well, but the car's upside down. It can't roll.
Yeah, well, you know, it could roll right off my workbench onto the floor.
All right, thank you.
I can tell you that has happened more than once. And I've bounced a few cars off the floor. Which fortunately,
Martin, I know this was a lot of trouble for you, but I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. Because I hear from so many modelers that this is why they just don't like to build cars, because they just don't want to have anything to do with the underbody detail. So I hope by seeing how you did it and what you did, and frankly, that it's not rocket science to do this. I hope it helps a lot of modelers consider revising their opinion and maybe taking a shot at building some cars with underbody details. So thank you so much for doing this.
not a problem, Jim. I mean, you know, you're right. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. The diagrams, instructions, what goes where, all that information is readily available. It's a little tedious sticking a wire into the holes that aren't there that you can't find, but a little bit of practice, you know, I can snap together a K brake in minutes.
Yeah.
AB takes me hours, but that's only because I'm distracted by 14 other projects, and I've only, you know, I don't do it every day. K brake I've done 4 this week. So, and it's only Wednesday.
I understand. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. Now I want to introduce you to a fantastic modeler, Steve Sherrill. Steve builds micro layouts, if you can believe that. And he's going to talk to us tonight about some of his micro layouts and about a stub switch that he built that I'm anxious to hear. And he's also going to start a new series next week called What Do You Want to Talk About? And I'm really looking forward to that because I've got some things that I'd like to talk about, or at least get your reaction to. And I'm going to use Steve's segments next week and following that to ask some questions and see what kind of response we get. So Steve, welcome, and thank you so much for doing this.
I think we've lost
I don't
Steve.
have him.
Oh, you haven't lost me.
Oh,
I'm-
good.
I need the full screen. I can't get it.
There, you got half a screen now.
Ah,
There he is.
I don't, hold on. Let me get this started now. It's been a long day today. Okay. Now. Micro layouts.
Bill, can you just take me off and just let Steve have the screen? Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Now we're right. Micro layouts. There was a guy named Carl Arndt that actually wrote a book about micro layouts, designs, and different people's ideas of how to construct and make micro layouts. He's passed away, I think, a few years ago, and his book is still available. If you want to also refer and see a lot of micro layouts, you can go on YouTube and look up micro layouts under that heading, and you'll see a lot of them.
I believe they're becoming more and more popular in the United States. They're very popular overseas because of the lack of space that Europeans have in their homes. They're great operations for taking and showing off and sharing your modeling. What I have here, I actually showed one already, which was a Lazy Susan micro layout. Unfortunately, it's in the house and I'm out in the train room, so I can't show you that one. But that was on a Lazy Susan that turned in a 360, and you could actually run both sides of the railroad. The one I've got here that I'm going to show you is 12 by 26 inches. It's got some fairly unique things on it, in the fact that it's got a turntable made out of a DVD. It's got a sector plate. And it also has a stub switch, which we're going to get into later on how they're constructed. But this has operation, and the object of this layout is to get these two cars on this side, on this track over here, in an opposite setting. So in other words, the orange car will be here, and the red car will be here. And then we reverse it. So this takes about 30 minutes to do two cars at the speed for which this locomotive runs, which is fairly slow, I would think. And we have to couple and uncouple the cars. And this particular layout, all the dimensions only allow one car in a movement. So in other words, when I hook up this car that you're going to see here, it can only run to the end of the sector plate. That's the only room for one car. So I'll bring the sector plate because I want to drop the locomotive, the car. I have to make sure I get it lined up because I'm on a side angle here, which I didn't quite get it lined up. All right, come on. Yeah, with me, there was an earthquake here just then. So I'll use the turntable now to go around this car, which I think I had the truck off, but so there's a lot of things going on that you have to keep straight. So now I've got the stub switch thrown. And then once this is dropped off, I then have to go over and get the other car and do the same thing. Bring it back over here. So you can see there's some operation on these little micro layouts. And if you just like fiddling, these are great little playtime. So again, this one is 12 by 26. But we come over here, and I have to turn everything around. This is one I made in about an hour or so. And since I'm all battery powered, I don't have to do any wiring. Normally, I would have painted the track all black and done a little more scenicking, but I wanted you to see what it looks like with all that done. So what we have here is a regular length switch with the points. And that switch sits about 9 inches long. What we want to do is we want to cut off this part here. We remove it. And since this is an Atlas switch, which I got secondhand, by the way, for less than $5, and our points to remove are right here where they have these plates, which supposedly allow electric continuity to go through. So you only have to cut the inside and outside rail at the same width and length directly across. And then those plates and everything will come off underneath with just a little bit of force. And so what you then have is a switch, which is only 5 inches long, and you have made enough room for a car that I run on my railroad. So that gave me enough room to run a car, an extra car. So what I do is I then have to put I use Caboose Industries ground throws and line it up so that I can throw the rails so they line up. I had, let me just come over here to prototype for a moment. The prototype, you can see what they do here in the prototype. And all we're doing is creating the same thing. This rail here moves, this piece of track moves. We have the same thing over here where this piece of track moves. I have it anchored back about 13 ties. This is HO track, 13 ties back. I have done less and I have done more depending on how much stress you want to place on this machine. But 13 seems to be a really smooth performance. So I just took that as what I'm using. So for this particular micro here, I used all the scraps that I had left. I had some road bed from a previous project. I had some track from this is all from previous projects. And I got a box full of Atlas track at a train show for $20 with like 14 turnouts and 12 bumpers, you know, thing that you wouldn't normally use. But I went ahead and got those. If you were to use this as a test track, you'd probably want to have something like this, which is a re-railer, because you don't want to pull it, you know, putting the trucks on it, everything. Also, you want bumpers so you don't run off your test tracks, which I know we probably never do. And so what I do, I take those and cut those down right behind the bumper itself. And that gives me a little, about 1 inch piece of track with the bumper end on it. And it doesn't look like that ugly thing that normally comes with it. Some of the tools I use for this, of course, have to cut the track. I use large spikes to spike down the track here. And I think I got this about 20 years ago, this whole container. But you can see how large these spikes are. They're pretty big. And they'll hold a lot. And then for the curves, I use the ribbon rails. This is a 22-inch curved ribbon rail. Supposedly goes in there. Makes it much smoother. And push the nails in, of course, with the spikes in with the biggest tool we have. And then I'm already planning what I want to put here. And so after I make all the cuts and everything and put the track in and test it and make sure it's running good, I've created a little partial scene where I think I'm going to, once I finish, here's a building that's going to go on, maybe a water tower next to it, you know, put grass and some stuff very similar to the other one we had over on the other side. I think that what you have is something that you can take anywhere and show it off, operate it, and just have fun with it. It's kind of fun just to switch even one switch. You know, when I was testing it, I ran the thing for like 30 minutes and didn't even realize it going through the switches. Now, stub switches were around until about 1900, and then as speed increased, they took them up on standard gauge railroads. They still were around for the narrow gauge, and there's still a triple stub switch up at EBT in Warbisonia, Pennsylvania today, if you want to see it.
Why did the railroads use the stub switches, Steve?
Well, let me refer to Google. So that is the authority. They said that there was simple, cheap construction, and nearly all stub switches are replaced with standard point switches due to lack intrinsic alignment. So they were hard to line up. And as the speeds got greater, you know, they had to make 100% certain that they were all lined up when they went through the switches. But that was the main reason. To me, it makes a lot of sense for model railroads to have that, especially for narrow gauges, because we're not really running real fast. and it saved us a lot of space. I mean, I can get an extra car on these little 12-foot cars, and even one of the 18-foot cars that we use is what I actually cut out, you know? So to me, that's very valuable space that we can use on a micro. I have no switches like that on my big railroad. There's 75 other ones, but not one of those. I just didn't think about it when I was building it, so otherwise I would have had a couple. But these little micro, they're easy to build, they're quick, and if you're just starting out, you know, this is what you want to build, something like this. You can hand lay the track, it's only a little bit of hand laying. You can detail a building out if you want, and you can also insert this later on, the whole thing into a more detailed and complete layout. So, I mean, it's just got a lot of advantages. Now, Harrisburg, they just had an 0-30 show, and I believe there was 8 micro layouts there. So that, to me, that was a lot of micro layouts that people are bringing to show their equipment and some of the work that they've done. So, I mean, are there any questions on anything? I mean,
I think it's a great idea because a lot of people are, you know, they're downsizing. They don't have the space they used to have. And, you know, the one that you showed, the 12-inch by 26-inch, my God, you could spend easily a couple of hours just playing with that.
Oh, listen, there's 2 cars on there now. You think it's easy with 2 cars? Try 3 cars and what you get. Where you'll be racking your brain. You know, I run this 2-car thing a lot, but I put a 3rd car down there, and I said I'm only going 2 cars. Really, Steve, I mean, it makes you think.
Hey, Steve, it's Greg. I got a question. I didn't notice on the other layout until I thought of it too late. How do you ballast around the stub switch when you're moving the rail?
Well, the stubs. What I did not put anything down there.
Okay, I see.
Now, I could do it. I could do it. I was going to put some kind of material under it, a very, very thin styrene or something like that, paint it and stick it to it, and then I would be able to slide it with. But being that it's black, you know, it doesn't really make much difference. Now I could do it back here probably and not have any worry. We have a little problem up here maybe.
How far up do you spike it?
It's not spiked at all.
Okay, well, how far back, I guess I mean.
13, I've done 10 ties, and I've done 13. This one is 4. I think this is 13. Another one over here is like 12. Okay. So it depends on what you feel. You know, I just I've even believe it or not cut a rail so it would actually slide easier. You know, if you use a real thin disc, you don't get much of a gap. And it really comes over easy then. But when you spike it down in this material, the big spikes that I use, they're probably 1/4-inch spikes. We don't have anything to worry about as far as movement.
Okay,
now, I have a little reader on here that Bob Gelmacher gave to me, and that's a little reduced too. That's only like 3 inches long. So that's something special I put on.
Yeah, that's nice too.
Yeah. Oh, believe me, you know, it's really nice. It's a 2-piece deal, and it sits in there between. It's got a place on the ends where it sits in between the ties, so it's down low. You will have to make sure that your KD hooks down under, you know, the supposed hoses.
Yeah.
You got to make sure those are up, but I cut all those off anyway. because they just seem to cause more problems than they're really worth. But yeah,
And I see you like the dental picks also for uncoupling.
somebody introduced me to that, and I gave a bunch of those away.
Yeah, we take them to all our operating sessions.
Listen, they are wonderful. They really are. They work great, and they don't scratch anything up. You know.
Yeah, don't tell anybody. I've stolen my wife's.
Well, we don't sell. We can't get these in West Virginia.
Steve, how did you make the larger transfer table?
This one? Oh, this one. Which this
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
The sector plate. It's not a transfer table. They're called sector plates. Well, many years ago, the Atlas book, layout book, had a layout with a turntable where they put a nail in the middle for a turntable. I said, well, look, if I put a nail on the end, I got, a sector plate. And so there it is. And the stops are nothing but spikes, the height of the thickness of the tie. And so I can get those one end to the other. You do have to kind of look and line up the middle ones.
Yep.
But believe it or not, I have put a Lazy Susan under this one when I took it to a train show. But it's not as effective as the other layout. I wish I could have shown that layout again tonight, but it's just not. It's in the house, I took it in there. I don't have room for all this stuff now.
Yeah, I really like the one you the other one you brought up to Harrisburg. That was a neat setup.
Yeah, well, maybe in the future I'll bring it out here and do it again. That was kind of unique. That was actually for people with disabilities or people who can't stand a long time. Because it's when you put it on a table, a wheelchair will go right up to that and be the perfect height. We have a modeler that comes over and he has some mobility problems, and we let him sit in the chair, and I tested it with him, and he handled it great. So, that's kind of, it's kind of different, to have that kind of capability of a model, especially when we're all getting older. And what are we going to do when we can't stand up for a long time on the railroads, mine is a pretty big railroad, and I get tired walking around it. Now I've got a hip problem, so I don't know what's going to happen with that. But, that's something that we're probably all going to have to go through. But it's just, I will show the other one at another time,
Well, I tell you, I'm impressed with the sector plate. I've never thought about that before, but that's a neat idea.
Well, now look, I've made it very simple. Some people put it on a piece of wood and move the wood. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little more complicated than I wanted to do. I like simple. I like to show people the ease of this stuff building. And when people say, I don't have room for a layout, I let them come over and run this thing for about an hour, 2 cars.
Yeah.
It makes a difference. Everybody thinks they have to have a big layout. It's not true. It's just not true.
Steve, I have a question.
Neat
Sure.
idea.
Steve, a gentleman on YouTube asked, do you have problems making the scenery match up with so much rail movement, being as you have to leave so much space?
Well, I don't, because I understand that you can only scenic so much. Now, I don't know. Well, I do know, because the sector plate has, can you see? Well, you can see this, right? I can lift this up over a lot of scenery and still drop it down. So I could probably, do some more scenicking on that, but I'm okay with it. Most people don't notice it because it's black. It's kind of like, if it was red, yeah, it would probably stand out. But being that the track is kind of weathered a little bit, it's black down here. Now, if I had to do it again, I would have put, because it's all cork road bed on top, I would have maybe got a sheet so you wouldn't see the separations to try to hide it a little bit more, But I just, this is one of the things you do for a couple hours and your building's done.
That doesn't look that bad.
No, I mean, it is what it is. I would rather have some, a little more background than what I have here. I just stuck this here. I'd rather like to have something over here or put it into a shadow box type thing. I think that would be a lot more effective, but that's all. We can still do that. That's not impossible to do, even at this stage of the game. But, you just put a few trees on it, a plastic building, and you weather it up and you've got something that, hey, it's got a little something going on, little action, and it'll keep you busy. And you can pick it up and, put it under your bed if you want. So, or you can hang it on the wall or something. It doesn't have to, get in the way. But right now it's on my operator's desk, which it almost fits perfect. And so it doesn't interfere with my other layout over here, which I'm still going to be working on to finish up a little bit. And I'll probably share that at another time. But this one would literally maybe a couple hours to build. I had I had all the parts, all the things necessary, and I just went over and got them. They were from other projects that I had done. And this particular one, you could wire up. This one, the other one will be a little more difficult because it's got a lot of things going on, But this one, you could just put 2 wires at one end, 2 wires at the other end. You should be able to run it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a real advantage for somebody who had DCC, or it can be a test track, like I say. You get to check your cars. We always have that one set of wheels that won't go through a switch, but you turn them around and maybe they'll go through a switch or something. But I just, this stuff is just fun. And
Well,
I think
I can't thank you enough for showing it to us, because I'm really impressed with it, to tell you the truth. I've never built one, but for a lot of people, this is the answer.
Well, I think so. Especially the people in Florida, that don't have much room to build a layout.
Well, you're right about that. Well, talk to us a little bit about this new series that we're going to be starting next week called "What Do You Want to Talk About?"
Well,
this was your idea.
Yeah.
Steve, flip your camera around. Use that button to flip your camera around so we can see you and not the layout now. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Now, well, it's going to be, what do you want to talk about? I've been fooling with trains now for 70 some years and experienced a lot of stuff. I was even married on a train and got national coverage on that, by the way. On TV. That's no lie. My wife is so impressed. I had nothing to do with that. But, things like that. I just want to, I asked you to, one of my first questions is going to be, who's the best model railroad you've ever seen? That's my first question coming up. Everybody can think about who's got the best model railroad you've ever seen. And we'll see And I think you're going to be surprised because I'm going to give you one that nobody's ever heard of. And this guy had the best railroad I've ever seen. Yep.
Well, that's something for all of us to think of because you're going to do that the first time for next week.
Yep. And what I'd like to do is to have a lot of participation. You know, that's a question that we've got going on. What's the best railroad you've ever seen? And, you know, everybody has seen railroads. I don't care if it's 3-rail, 2-rail, or monorail. It doesn't make any difference to me. Trolley, you know, jet train, it doesn't. If you like the layout, you know, share it. Tell me who it was. And maybe we see them in the magazine and maybe not. You know, there's been a lot of people who have got beautiful railroads and you never hear about them. And I've been to one. The guy did get in the magazine a little bit, but he was just a fantastic modeler. Fantastic. You know.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this series. I can't thank you enough for coming up with the idea and agreeing to do it. So we will start this off next week.
Well, I guess I talked myself into a lot of work now.
Yes, sir. Can't wait. I appreciate you mentioning trolley. Martin and I both appreciate you at least mentioning trolley was a possibility.
Oh, hey, you know, I do. I'm going to make a trolley micro. And I'll do it, and I'm going to have it next week.
I can't wait to see it.
Now, I am going to do it with the one I've already got because Bob made a trolley that if you went and hit a bumper, it went the other way. Yeah. I've got one now, and I'm going to put it on there, and you know, that's just for you.
Bump along. I got it. Well, I'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Steve.
Okay. Bye now.
Yes, sir. Well, that's it for our show this evening. I hope you have enjoyed it. And now we'd like to show you our caboose. By the way, the caboose last week has so far gotten almost 160 separate views. So I know that you all enjoy these. Well, that's it for tonight, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. I hope that you've enjoyed it, but most importantly, I hope you learned something. That's what this is all about. Thanks again for being here.